Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I apologize for my absence over the past week, but around all the holiday celebrations, I've been frantically working to try and finish off the 2 Christmas pads that I started earlier this fall, and one of those was Pine Street Square. So I have finished it off, but I have used up all the paper, but now I am just kind of going through and working on putting together all of the projects that I have. So there will be a bunch of videos to come of Christmas projects, so bear with me. I know Christmas is over, but I still have lots of Christmas projects to share from these last 2 pads. So today I am going to share the cards, the last batch of cards that I made from my Pine Street Square pad, and I got a big batch of cards made, used up most of the last of the paper that I had at this point, and I did use card sketches again just to help speed up the process, because like I said, I was hustling to get these 2 pads done by the end of the year. So let's jump right into these. This is Freshly Made Sketches number 288. And here I had a bunch of this burlappy word pattern paper. I had a bunch of big strips of it left. Not enough to be a full card mat, but you know, enough to be like the main focal point. So you'll see a bunch of different variations of how I was trying to use up as much of that paper as I could. So here I just took it, instead of adding a strip, I just cut a little bit off of my main piece here and left a little bit of a gap, so it looks like there's a strip of green going behind it, so the green card mat shows through. And then I also had a bunch of this greenish wood green with the plaid reindeer on it, so I just used it as a backing piece to one of the burlap reindeers. So I was trying to use those up as well. So I have several of these, and then I kind of followed Christy Marcotte's. I stole her signature here of adding a little banner here at the top, just to add, to kind of tie in that color and add a little bit of extra something at the top. So this one used different patterns, but this used up all of the burlap reindeers that I had left. And then I have one other version of this that just uses one of those chipboard Santas that I had from Hobby Lobby, and so I only have a handful of those left. So that was my first card. Here is the deconstructed sketch number 129. Again, just using up some of the bigger pieces of patterned paper. I used a green card mat on. If I matted, I usually used green just because the red was a little bit different than the red that I had in my stash. So, and then just used some of those chipboard Santas again as my focal point. Here is My Favorite Things sketch number 192. And again, used up some more of that big pieces of the burlap words, and then I was able to use up some of the little thin scraps that I had left in my stash. And then this sentiment, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," I actually printed that from my silhouette because I had been wanting to find a way to use that. I thought that was a cute saying, and I didn't even change the colors. That was the colors that came in, so it was perfect. Here is My Favorite Things sketch number 167. And again, more of that burlap word. And then here I had cut some little Merry Christmas phrases out of white vinyl for a project my daughter had been working on, and I had cut a couple extra just in case she messed up and needed some extra. So there was one left, and so I just put it here on that red wood grain. And then these circles are all punched from scraps from the pad, mostly from like cut-aparts that I had fussy cut out of, and so there were big corners left, so I did a lot of circle punches. And then here's another version. This time I just stamped my greeting onto another one of the patterned paper strips. This is My Favorite Things sketch number 372. And I had a bunch of strips that were pretty close in size and width. So it was like, you know, it's like they all came from the same leftover piece after I had cut stuff down. So I just kind of grouped these together on this card, and I did ink the edges just so that they would kind of stand out from each other. And then I stamped a sentiment on more scraps from the pad. And then I also added a couple came back and added some more punched circles. And I should have inked those. I didn't ink those for some reason when I had inked the rest of the pieces on the card. So a couple variations of that. And then this one, I actually had pieces long enough to cover the whole card front. So I went ahead and went with that. Operation Right Home sketch number 90. And this I just used 2 different pieces of scraps that I had and then covered up the seam, like where they met here. This one I just used a sentiment that I stamped on craft cardstock. And then this one I used some, like a patterned paper strip that I had left. And then this Happy Holidays is one of the Making Memory rub-ons that I had. And I don't have any left, but it was the Simply Stated Happy Holiday from Making Memory. And this was from, I want to say it was like 2003. I don't remember where I saw that, but this was an older rub-on sheet. I think it was actually on the sheet itself that had said 2003, and they worked wonderfully. So if you have old rub-ons in your stash and you are contemplating not using them because you don't think they're going to work, give them a try, because with this pad, I used a ton of old rub-ons and they all worked really well. So especially the Making Memories one, they were really good quality. So use the Happy Holidays. I just did the rub-on directly onto the pattern paper. And then this little holly leaf was left on the sheet of the reindeer, burlap reindeer. I ended up using all of it. So there were like 3 reindeer and 3 little holly leaves. So that was one I had left, so I used it up. This is Operation Right Home sketch number 44. And instead of doing a card mat on here, I wanted to add a little bit of subtle pattern to my craft card front, and I didn't have any embossing folders that were like Christmas or winter themed. So I pulled out some stencils from my stash. I've gotten these in the Echo Park warehouse boxes because they're not something I would have purchased for myself. But I decided to give them a try, and it was kind of fun, and I like the subtle pattern it gives, the interest it gives on my card front. So the first one was it's ornaments, and it's Cardabella, the ornament stencil. And then this is Cardabella Christmas, and it's snowflakes, and it is just called Blanket of Snow stencil. So I just took some light brown ink, I think it was Distress ink, and used the stencil, and then just kind of added just a little bit of subtle pattern behind my pattern paper scraps. And then again, these are the Happy Holidays rub-ons from Making Memories, and I used one of the chipboard Santas, and I did ink all of my pattern paper pieces to help them stand out. And then here is the ornament pattern, and then the same thing. So I like how those turned out. Like, it was just kind of a nice subtle, and I just wanted to play and try something different. So this is I Heart Sketches number 92, and I got to use up a couple of the bigger pieces of pattern paper I had left. And then after cutting Christmas trees out, I had a bunch of like weird angle pieces, and so this allowed me to use up a couple of those rather than just punching shapes out of it. So here on this one, I just added a punched star, Merry Christmas sentiment that I had stamped, and then I added it called for a flag up here, so this is just another scrap that I had. This one I did the rub-ons directly onto the paper. This is Operation Right Home sketch number 151. And this one I went with a winter theme instead of Christmas. So there was this blue snowflake wood grain, and then there was white wood grain that had some snowflakes on it as well. So I just used those together, combined two pieces to make a card mat, and then have my craft scallop cardstock pieces, circles, whatever, here. And then this white is actually some of the white wood grain paper that was part of the pad. And then I used some of my Cardabella Cabin Fever enamel shapes on there, just to be, again, do something different and have like a non-Christmassy card. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 378. Just used a bunch of strips that I had left, stamped my sentiment directly on some pattern paper, and then here's some more of the circles that I had punched from scraps. This is S&S sketch number 6. I don't know if you can see that very well. And just used, I mean, the blue was Christmassy because it's actually Christmas music, like sheet music, but I just kind of went with like a blue kind of winter theme. And this is actually a piece of the cover that I had cut apart, cut down, and it was like the perfect size for this. So and then here's some of that white wood grain that was also part of the pad, and then I just took a rub-on from A Perfect Winter by Echo Park. And I think it was UW from Project 39 mini albums were asking about all the Echo Park rub-ons. I have never had any issue with them. I think they work really well. And like I said, I used rub-ons throughout this whole card process with this pad and didn't have any problem even with those old ones. So I am a renewed fan of rub-ons. I had them in my stash for a long time because I used to love to use them and then just forgot about them, and so now I'm a renewed fan. I've had a lot of fun using some of those up. And then here I just stamped my sentiment on some more of that white, because I was trying to, instead of bringing in pieces of other cardstock, I had so much like neutral background, like the white or the burlap, I just decided to start stamping my sentiments on that to help use it up faster. This sketch does not have a name, but it will be linked in the description box below, so you can find it if you want it. Here I just used up a couple different scraps that I had, and then another one of those reindeers, and then this Noel was another rub-on, and it came from another Making Memories pack. It doesn't have a name because it actually came with like a mini album kit, but it had a bunch of Christmas words, and so I just went ahead and used that one up on here. Mojo Monday sketch number 506. And then again, just trying to use up some of the random scraps that I had. Backed these on red this time because I did find some red scraps that worked. Did another rub-on from the Making Memories pack. And then these little red burlap circles were punched from just the corners of what was left after I had cut apart, or fussy cut out of a cut apart piece. So I was just trying to use up the paper as much as I could, so I even made my little, you know, random circle embellishments out of the paper. This is Operation Right Home sketch number 171. That one's not one to show up very well. Again, random scraps stamped onto some of the burlap pattern paper, and then just used some of the different circles I had to give the bottom a little bit of interest. And Freshly Made Sketches number 207. Again, random scrap pieces stamped onto the, or actually this is a rub-on from the American Traditional Designs rub-on pack that I had started with. And I have like one rub-on left from that one. But just used the last Merry Christmas, it's a green. So I put it onto some red, like a red scrap that I had, and then some more stars punched from other pattern paper scraps. This is Operation Right Home at sketch number 203, and I have a bunch of different variations of this one. This one I just went with a winter theme, used up some of those blue snowflake strips, and then I did the white as my strip here, and then the white snowflake wood grain as my sentiment piece, just stamped directly on there. This one, I didn't do the fishtails, but it kind of fits truer to the sketch a little bit because I have my embellishment here in the center, and then I did add an extra sentiment on here. And again, stamped directly onto the pattern paper. This one, I went with 4 strips because that's what I had of this paper that were all about the same size. Kind of tied it together with another pattern paper strip and then just stamped directly onto a craft scallop circle. Again here, this one is probably truest to the sketch because it has the element here in the center and then the sentiment beneath it. And I backed this one on some dark green, like a solid pattern that was in my scraps. And then I did do the fishtails on the bottom of that one. And then here, this one, they were all different sizes, and so I left them that way, and then just put my sentiment down here on the short side, just to be a little bit different. And then here is one of my staple sketches that I use all the time, Operation Ride Home, sketch number 154. I have a bunch of variations of it as well. This one was using up just the snowflake wood grain, went with the winter theme again. I didn't do a backer piece on this one because I didn't have anything that went well with it, so I just inked all the edges of everything to help it stand out on the craft. Here I had wanted to create some more like burlappy reindeer embellishments, so I found in my stash I had a stamp set that with dye, like matching dies. Got it from Michael's last year, I think, after Christmas, and it had 3 different reindeers and then a couple sentiments and then some little like presents and whatnot. And so I picked a couple, like 2 of the reindeer stamps, stamped it onto some burlap pattern paper that I had in my stash, and then I colored in just a few of the things. I colored in the hat, his nose, his hoofs, and then the bells, the jingle bells, just to give it a little bit of interest, but I wanted the burlap to really show through. So I had some of that burlap paper left, so I just decided to use it as my kind of square matte piece here, and then again inked all of my edges so they kind of stood out since it was all very, the burlap and the craft for kind of all the same tone. Just trying to help them stand out, and then just did my sentiment down here on pattern paper. This one is just a bunch of different scraps stamped onto some of the wood grain pattern paper. Again, backed it with burlap this time though. And then another winter version. And this one has a vinyl snowflake that I had cut from a scrap piece of vinyl when I was cutting out some bigger images. So then my last pile here doesn't have sketches. They're just kind of random cards that I had put together, just trying to use up the scraps that I had. Here is another one of those reindeer. He doesn't have a hat, so all I did was color in the jingle bells, silver, and then I colored in his hoofs and his nose. And some random strips. And then I did a double matte on this one with the burlap and the red to help it pop. Here again, using up a bunch of the strips. I used 2 as kind of a backer piece here, and then all these little ones together as my main element. And I did the rub on here, and it even worked really well going across like the different layers. So you can see I was able to get in between the strips on the happy. So it worked really well. And then just added some more little circle punches from the scraps. Another strip card. This time I just added banners down here for a little bit different interest. And I stamped onto the green circle pattern. More strips. I always have lots of strips. Here's another one of my burlap reindeers, and this one I just used another circle that I'd already punched and added a sentiment in it. Here is a bunch of strips again, pieced together, just use a Santa and then stamped sentiment. This, I did have like 3 journal cards left when I started this batch, and so this one I just used 2 strips together to kind of create the card mat, and then backed my journal card on some craft cardstock and called it done. This one was just quick and simple. And then here's the other 2 journal cards I had left. It's the same card. This is the front, this is the back. And it had like this wreath. You can kind of see bits and pieces of it behind the Santa. And then in the middle of the wreath, it said like Christmas memories. So it was geared more towards like a scrapbooking journal card. And so I just used the Santa to cover up the words that were on there. And then this pattern, the stripe pattern right here, actually came from one of the other journal cards that I had fussy cut out of. So all 3 of these pieces were journal cards from the pack. And then the last cards I did, I was just using up all the bits and pieces, the squares and strips that I had left. And I hadn't done any like patchwork cards like this in a long time, so this was a lot of fun. So I took some of the bigger strips that I had left and grouped them by size. And so these are all 1.5 inch squares. So anything that was at least 1.5 inches wide, I went ahead and cut it down to 1.5 inch squares. And then just put glue. There's a piece of cardstock here on top that's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. No. Yes. Just shy, like it's 1/8 of an inch smaller than my A2 size cards. My brain's not doing the math this morning, but so I just covered it with glue and then added my squares here at an angle and left just a little bit of border in between, and then glued that mat onto the front of my card. And then I came back in and was trying to use up some of those last little bitty shapes that I had left. So I added some detail to the plain burlap, like some of the plainer squares. And then I have a stamped sentiment here. And then here, this is the same type of card, but these are 1 inch squares. So I had a bunch of little 1 inch squares. And again, added some stamped shapes, trying to use those up, and another stamped sentiment. And then this last one is just using a whole bunch of little bitty strips that I had left. So again, just took a card mat size piece of cardstock, covered it with adhesive, and then just started laying my strips down. And then I was trying to figure out what to do for my sentiment, because it needed to be something, you know, that was going to stand out on all the busyness. And I had actually also made a bunch of like little mini cards and tags, and I had made this one with the intention that it was going to be the front of like a little mini note card. And I hadn't put it on a card yet. I had just made like the fronts, and they were all sitting there waiting to go on like a little card base or tag. And so I happened to see this, and I'm like, ooh, I think that will work with this busy card. So I matted it, like it was already on the red, and then I matted it with the craft just to kind of help it stand out a little bit more. So, and then of course, after I made all of my cards and tags, I went through and took all the scraps that I had left and added them into the inside of my cards. And with this round, I got 46 A2 size cards. So I've gotten a lot of different types of cards out of this pad. So that's been nice, along with you know, other projects that I've made too. So these are the cards that I got this round. Like I said, 46 of these. I used up the whole pack, finished off the pack of the burlap reindeer and holly, finished off all of the making memories, simply stated rub-ons that said happy holidays. And then of this traditional, American traditional rub-ons and the other making memory rub-ons, all I have left are the words rejoice, the phrase peace on earth, and then the Santas. So out of all these 2 packs, I have 3 rub-ons left. So, oh, and then I had showed you out of 20 pieces, I have 4 of the chipboard Santas left. So not only did I use up a bunch of the paper, but I also used up a bunch of embellishment and several packs of really old rub-ons that are now out of my stash. So I feel really good, and it was nice to get back into card making and, you know, do these patchwork scrap type cards. I hadn't done those in forever. So, and I also played with some different techniques for me using the stencils. So this was a lot of fun. It felt really good. And I have more videos to come. I'm going to share the tags that I made during this process. I will share those in another video because this one's getting a little bit long. And then I have some other projects to share after that. So I did technically finish this all before the end of 2019, but the videos are still going to trickle in 2020. So it is the beginning of a new year. I hope you all had a wonderful New Year's Eve and that you all have a blessed, happy, and crafty 2020. Thanks, everybody.